जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता। पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंगा। विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा। तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मागे। गाहे तव जय गाथा जनगण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता। जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे।
Good morning. Honorable former Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh, Shri Digvijay Singh Ji. Honorable Minister for Higher Education, Sports and Youth Affairs, Shri Jeetu Patwari Ji. President of the Indian History Congress, Shri K.M. Shrimali Ji. Chief Secretary is not here. Chief Secretary is not here. Shri Mandloi Ji. Principal Secretary, Higher Education, Shri Mandloi Ji, and other dignitaries on the dais, members of the press, and ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. It gives me great pleasure in welcoming all the delegates of the Indian History Congress to Bhopal. The Barkatullah University is proud to be hosting the 79th session of this premier body of historians. I wish you a very fruitful 3 days of deliberation, and I'm sure that the History Congress will be a huge success. Thank you, sir.
President of the Indian History Congress, Professor K.M. Shrimali. Professor Irfan Habib, Senior Vice President of the Indian History Congress. The Honorable former Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh, Shri Digvijay Singh Ji. The Honorable Minister for Higher Education, Sports and Youth Affairs, Government of Madhya Pradesh, Shri Jeetu Patwari. Professor Bhupinder Singh, our local secretary. Respected presidents of the various academic sections of the IHC. Esteemed members of the Executive Committee of the IHC, members of the press, colleagues, students, and friends. A very warm welcome to you to the 79th session of the Indian History Congress at Bhopal. Barely 2 weeks before the scheduled 79th session at the Savitribai Phule Pune University in December 2018, the IHC received the shocking news that the SPG was reneging on its commitment to host this premier body of historians, a commitment that was made a year earlier in December 2017. The ostensible reason for this cancellation, euphemistically referred to by the SPPU as a postponement, was lack of funds, although the contradictory comments made by various functionaries to the media suggested that there was more to the matter. What was disturbing was the complete disregard for the huge monetary losses and great inconvenience experienced by our delegates due to this insensitive and irresponsible act. It is under these circumstances that I, as Secretary, on behalf of the EC of the IHC, sought various options for the hosting of the 79th session at the earliest, so that the unbroken record of the Congress to not miss a session except during times of national strife remained intact. We are very overwhelmed and privileged that the Honorable Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh, Kamal Nath ji, offered us the complete support of the government of Madhya Pradesh in hosting this session, and we would like to express our gratitude to him. We are also deeply grateful to the Honorable former Chief Minister Shri Digvijay Singh, who was instrumental in the organizing of the 62nd session of the IHC in Bhopal in 2001, and who was with us every step of the way in organizing the 79th session once again in Bhopal. Indeed, without his encouragement and support, this session would not have taken off at the speed with which it was organized. Thank you, sir. In 1935, stalwarts of Indian history dreamt of creating a platform for the exchange of ideas, sharing of research, and providing a solid understanding of the past based on rigorous study and analysis of historical sources and contexts. Today, 84 years later, we can say with a legitimate sense of pride that the IHC has earned a name for itself not only within the country but also across the world for the excellent quality of research papers presented here. The institution is a meeting place for the senior, well-experienced scholars and young budding historians. Our numbers are steadily increasing, a sure sign of the good health of the organization as generations of scholars commit themselves to its growth and vigor. Despite the short notice for this Bhopal session, we have received an overwhelming response from our members who have taken great pains to be here. Many have written to us that they are making a statement by coming to Bhopal. In fact, the Kerala History Congress has actually brought a banner saying that we stand with the Indian History Congress. A statement they are making is that history cannot be manipulated and historians cannot be cowed down by threats, slandering, or in this case, cancellation. We are very thankful to the Barkatullah University and the RCVP Noronha Academy of Administration for playing host to this event. There are over 800 people who have come from different parts of the country who will be presenting papers in the various sections, namely Ancient India, Medieval India, Modern India, Archaeology, Contemporary India, and Countries Other than India. The prestigious Professor S.C. Mishra Memorial Lecture, an annual event at the IHC, and the IHC Symposium on Myth and History are scheduled in the early evening on 26th and 27th February, respectively. There are 4 panels that have been convened specially for this session. To commemorate the 150th birth anniversary of Gandhiji, we have a panel, Mahatma Gandhi and the Making of the Indian Nation, on 27th-28th February 2019. The second panel on the history of Madhya Pradesh covers themes across a vast chronological span, from the ancient through the medieval to the modern periods, and will also be held on 27th and 28th February. Another panel is on religious interactions, syncretism, and social harmony, to be held in the forenoon of 28th February. The Aligarh Historian Society has organized a symposium on the makers of India, Ashoka, Akbar, Ram Mohan Roy, and Jawaharlal Nehru, in the forenoon of 27th February. There will also be a panel on Dalit history and politics. As you can see, we have a fully packed academic program over 3 days. We also have a cultural program where the musical traditions of the state of Madhya Pradesh will be showcased. Bhopal is a historic city surrounded by many monuments and places of great historical significance. We do also hope that our members will be able to visit some of these during their stay here. I wish you a very fruitful 3 days. Thank you. I now request Professor Shrimali, Shri Digvijay Singh ji, Shri Jitu Patwari ji, Professor Irfan Habib, Professor Shireen Musvi, Mr. Gurdeep Sappal, and Mr. Neeraj Mandloi to release copies of the proceedings of the 78th session of the Indian History Congress. Thank you. Our tradition has been to have the General President hand over charge for the coming year to the General President-elect. We are pained to inform our members of the passing away of Professor Sushil Chaudhary on 24th January 2019 after a brief illness. We offer our homage to him. Please play the video. There is a screen on the left-hand side. I'm sorry, members on the dais will not be able to see it, but I request you to please play the video for our members in the audience. Thank you. Our condolences to Professor Mahashweta Chaudhary, his wife, who is here with us today, and his children, as well as to all the members of the IHC. The EC of the IHC has unanimously decided to request our Senior Vice President, Professor Irfan Habib, to officiate as interim president until he can hand over charge to the next president-elect, whom we will elect in the EC meeting at the end of this session, when he will hand over charge in December 2019. So, sir, I hope that you will agree to do that. I now request the Chief Secretary, Shri S.R. Mohanty, who has joined us just now. A warm welcome to you, sir. I request you to say a few words.
Honorable Minister for Higher Education, Shri Jitu Patwari ji, Honorable Shri Digvijay Singh ji, Ex-Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh, distinguished guests, I deem it my singular honor to be speaking at the inaugural session of the Indian History Congress, which has had an illustrious history for the last 78 years. I was told by the organizers that there have been only 2 occasions in the past before 2018 that the Indian History Congress, which usually has its annual session in the month of December, got disrupted, once in 1942 and once in 1971. I'm grateful to the Chief Minister, the Minister for Higher Education, Mr. Digvijay Singh ji, for having decided and ensured that the Indian History Congress of this year is held at Bhopal in Madhya Pradesh. The Indian History Congress, over its history of 78 years, has seen great historians and public figures addressing important issues facing the society, culture and politics. I, as a civil servant and someone who has had close ties with the state of Madhya Pradesh, while I'm aware of my extreme limitations of not being an historian, despite the fact that I took history as a paper in my civil service examinations, I've been a keen observer of the history of the state of Madhya Pradesh in recent times. I've spent about 3.5 decades in the state and I've seen closely the development of its economy and society in these years. One of the first things that one notices is that it has been a state where the government since independence has believed in institution building as part of making a nation. In the field of culture, we have the Bharat Bhavan, the Swaraj Sansthan, the Tribal Museum, and in universities of Jabalpur, Vikram, Rewa, Indore, Barkatullah, they have all been part of this developmental odyssey. I did request the organizers that during a stay here, which I hope has been a little comfortable, you must make it to go and see the Tribal Museum. Long time back when I came out of the Louvre Museum in Paris, I just told one thing, that this has justified or this has fulfilled my entire existence of having come into this world, having seen the Louvre Museum. And a similar thought came to my mind when I came out of the Tribal Museum of Bhopal. If you haven't seen it, you must see it. I must request the organizers to make it a near compulsory item during these deliberations over the next 3 days. You must see it. It is something just out of the world. It's very different from a normal museum. It's been made by the people who have worked among the tribals of Madhya Pradesh. And it's a unique kind of a museum with a unique exhibits, and it tells the story of tribal development and a little bit of the anthropological history of the tribals of Madhya Pradesh. And basically the Indian historians and many who have been associated with the Indian History Congress have contributed to the explanation of the way economic changes and social political changes that have taken place in the Indian society. I have a sense that many of the experiments of building a sustainable society in the 80s and 90s have paved the way for greater well-being of the people. The changes in the governance at the grassroots level in the late 90s and the first decade in the 21st century, I believe, have a close relation with many social and economic changes of later years. Madhya Pradesh, as historians of ancient India have so nicely argued, has benefited from being part of the great Indian trade route, and any increase in the volume of trade increases the amount of prosperity herein. It must be an extremely exciting and interesting work to do if the modern and contemporary historians in the state and from among those attending the Congress were so inclined to try and see these interrelationships in relation to the state of Madhya Pradesh. I know that almost 1,200 great historians from across the country will be reading hundreds of papers over these 3 days. I just hope the facilities that have been provided here make it conducive for you to be able to state your piece, and may everybody who attends these benefit from this. I, on behalf of the state of Madhya Pradesh, welcome you all. I hope you have a reasonably comfortable time, and I hope you have a very successful and useful set of deliberations during a stay here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Mohanty. I now request the Honorable Minister for Higher Education, Shri Jitu Patwari, to address the delegates of the IHC.
सेवेंटी-9th इंडियन हिस्ट्री कांग्रेस के इस अधिवेशन में उद्घाटन सत्र में आदरणीय पूर्व मुख्यमंत्री राय साहब दिग्विजय सिंह जी, आदरणीय मोहंती जी, आदरणीय श्रीमाली जी, आदरणीय महालक्ष्मी प्रोफेसर महालक्ष्मी जी, हमारी यूनिवर्सिटी के वाइस चांसलर, डायस पर बैठे सभी सम्मानित इतिहासकार, आप सब देश के कोने कोने से और देश के बाहर से भी आए हुए सभी सम्मानित इतिहासकार, आप सबका मैं स्वागत करता हूं। मध्य प्रदेश की इस आयोजन में प्रोफेसर हबीब, मृदुला मुखर्जी, केएल टूटेजा जी, कुणाल चक्रवर्ती, सुचित्रा घोष, अरुण चट्टोपाध्याय, अन्य कई महान इतिहासकार आज देश में इतिहास की रक्षा करते हुए मैं समझता हूं कि अपना योगदान दे रहे हैं। वो सब यहाँ आएंगे, ये हमारे लिए गौरव का विषय है। आज से कुछ समय पहले भारत में सेना पर एक हमला हुआ, उसमें कई हमारे शहीद शहादत हुई उनको मैं श्रद्धा सुमन भी अर्पित करता हूं। और आज गौरव का विषय है कि अभी सुबह, आज रात में हमारी वायुसेना ने उसके बदला तो नहीं कहेंगे, पर एक जिस तरीके से वो आतंकी गतिविधियां चलाने वाले स्थानों को चिन्हित करके आज निस्तनाबूद किया, इसके लिए हम गौरव का भी एक मैं समझता हूं कि वायुसेना के साथ पूरा देश है, इसलिए ये सदन भी। सर्वप्रथम मैं सुशीला चौधरी, स्वर्गीय सुशीला, प्रोफेसर सुशीला चौधरी जी, जिन्होंने इंडियन हिस्ट्री, सुशील चौधरी जी जिन्होंने इंडियन हिस्ट्री का इस इतने बड़े फोरम को तैयार किया और आप सबको और हम सबको और देश को, इतिहासकारों को जोड़ा, मैं उनको याद करता हूं। आज इस अधिवेशन में दुनिया से अलग अलग हिस्सों से शिक्षाविद, इतिहासकार आए हैं। ये मध्य प्रदेश के लिए गौरव का विषय है। मैं समझता हूं कि पूरी, इससे पहले भी जब मध्य प्रदेश में ये आयोजन हुआ था, तब भी मध्य प्रदेश में हमारी कांग्रेस पार्टी की सरकार थी और हमें अवसर मिला था, और आज भी हम ही को ये अवसर मिला, हम भी सौभाग्यशाली हैं। मैं आप सबका स्वागत करता हूं। मध्य प्रदेश की धरती पर अधिवेशन हो रहा है। मध्य प्रदेश का भी इतिहास, वो चाहे अनेकों ऐतिहासिक घटनाओं को समेटे हुए, भीमबेटका हो या जावरा की, रायसेन की, पचमढ़ी की, विदिशा की, सांची की, ऐसी अनेकों घटनाएं या इतिहास से जुड़ी हुई संदर्भ में मध्य प्रदेश का इतिहास अपने आप में गौरवान्वित है। मध्य प्रदेश की धरती पर कई हमारे आदिवासी नायक हुए हैं। स्वतंत्रता संग्राम सेनानी आदिवासी नायकों में से हुए हैं। मध्य प्रदेश की धरती पर वीरांगनाओं की धरती भी कहा जाता है। इसमें भी कई हमारे इतिहास में रानी लक्ष्मीबाई, दुर्गावती, रानी अवंतिका, ऐसी कई वीरांगनाओं का भी ये धरती रहा है। इसलिए भी आप सबको खूब ढेर सारी इस धरती पर मैं स्वागत करता हूँ। मध्य प्रदेश के लिए ये गौरव की बात है कि मध्य प्रदेश की पिछली इस अधिवेशन की मेजबानी करने का अवसर तो मिला ही था, पर इस बार बहुत कम समय में हम लोगों को ये अवसर मिला और हमारे पूरे प्रयास रहे, हमारे विभाग के पूरे प्रयास रहे कि आप लोगों को किसी प्रकार की, सभी प्रकार की सहूलियतों के साथ इस अधिवेशन का आयोजन करने की हमें गौरव महसूस हुआ। इसलिए मैं आप सबको कोई कमी रही हो तो मैं इस मन से आप क्षमा प्रार्थी हूँ, पर कोशिश होगी कि एक नया भाव मध्य प्रदेश की धरती से पूरे विश्व में जाए। आप लोगों को इस आयोजन की मैं बधाई देता हूँ। मैं मानता हूँ कि इतिहास तथ्यों और तर्कों और सच्चाई के साथ भूत और वर्तमान के बीच एक सेतु का काम करता है, और जब इतिहास की गहराइयों को हम देखते हैं तो वर्तमान और अतीत के बीच के तथ्यों पर आधारित संवाद के रूप में मैं समझता हूं इस मंच को हमें मानना चाहिए। आज विश्व के इतिहास की एक झलक और भारत की एक खोज, हमारे पंडित जवाहरलाल नेहरू की दो ऐसी पुस्तकें हैं, ऐसी किताबें हैं जिन्होंने देश के इतिहास को तो समेटा ही, पर देश के, विश्व के इतिहास को भी उसमें संदर्भित किया, और वो आने वाले कई सालों तक पूरे विश्व का मार्गदर्शन करेंगे। ये भी हमारे लिए गौरव का विषय है। देश में कुछ इतिहासकार आजकल धार्मिक आधार पर इतिहास को तोड़ मरोड़ने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं। इतिहास, हमने जैसा कहा कि हमेशा सत्य पर ही आधारित होता है। इतिहास को तोड़ मरोड़ कर पेश करना एक अपराध भी है और एक आतंक भी है, जिसको आपको और हम सबको बचाना है, और सत्य पर आधारित आने वाली पीढ़ी को एक इतिहास का मूल भाव बने, इसके लिए सजग रहना है। मैं बहुत सी बातें ऐसी है जो राजनीतिक दृष्टि से कुछ समझी जाएगी, पर मैं मानता हूं कि लोकतंत्र एक ऐसी विधा है जिसमें इतिहास को रक्षित तो करती है पर आने वाली पीढ़ियों को भी सुरक्षित करने में सहयोग करती है। एक विचार कुछ समय से पनप रहा है कि कांग्रेस मुक्त भारत का, ये कांग्रेस मुक्त भारत का नहीं होता है, ये लोकतंत्र मुक्त भारत की सोच का विषय होता है। और मैं समझता हूं कि इसकी रक्षा करना आपका और हम सबका दायित्व भी है। मैं मानता हूं इस बात को कि जिस तरीके से आज पूरे विश्व में लोकतांत्रिक व्यवस्था जहां जहां रही, वहां वहां उन देशों ने उन्नति की। जहां जहां तानाशाही और एक विचार के जीवन को जीने की बात आई, वहां वहां उन देशों में, उन राष्ट्रों में आप देखोगे कि कई कुरीतियों ने और विकास को बाधित करते हुए एक आंतरिक संग्राम की ओर वो देश गए हैं। तो मैं आप सबसे अपेक्षा करता हूं कि भारत की लोकतांत्रिक व्यवस्था में आप सबका पूर्ण सहयोग होगा और आज का जो आयोजन है ये विश्व को एक नई दिशा देगा। आप सब का एक बार मैं फिर से स्वागत करता हूं, साधुवाद देता हूं, धन्यवाद देता हूं। आप सब यहाँ आए। आदरणीय हमारे CS साहब हैं, मुख्यमंत्री जी ने भी और आदरणीय पूर्व मुख्यमंत्री जी ने भी हमें निर्देशित किया है कि कोई किसी प्रकार की आपके इस आयोजन में कमी न रहे, इसके लिए हम सजग हैं। एक बार फिर मैं आप सबका स्वागत करता हूं, साधुवाद देता हूं। जय भारत, जय हिंद, धन्यवाद।
Thank you, Shri Patwari. The Honorable Minister has to attend another function, so he will leave us now. We thank him once again for giving us his valuable time and for all the support that he has given to this, the holding of this session. Thank you very much, sir.
Sorry.
I now request the Honorable Minister, the former CM of Madhya Pradesh, Shri Digvijay Singh Ji, to welcome and address the Indian History Congress.
Respected Professor K.M. Shrimali ji, President of Indian History Congress, one of the leading historians of India, respected Shri Irfan Habib Sahab, Professor Mahalakshmi Ramakrishna, Secretary of the Indian History Congress, Professor R.J. Rao, Vice Chancellor, Barkatullah University, Bhopal, Dr. Rakesh Bhatbyal and Shri Gurdeep Sappal, members of the Coordination Committee, the Chief Secretary, Shri Mohandi ji, Principal Secretary, Shri Neeraj Mandloi ji, distinguished historians, ladies and gentlemen. I'm extremely grateful to the Barkatullah University and the state government of Madhya Pradesh for having come forward to host the Indian History Congress once again in Bhopal. An organization an institution which was set up in 1935 and has been on the national scene since then. It's unfortunate it had to miss its annual conference only thrice for different reasons. I'm sorry to say the last conference, which was to be held in Pune, was postponed on a flimsy ground of lack of funds. When it was brought to our notice, I approached Honorable Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh, Kamal Nath ji, to invite the Indian History Congress to hold its conference in Bhopal. I recollect a situation like this had also come up in 2001, where we volunteered to host this August gathering. It is unfortunate that some people are looking at the Indian History Congress differently, based on their narrow parochial lines, who want to rewrite the history as per their own ideology, myth and mythology. This is something which is contrary to the basic idea of history, which has to be on facts, documentary evidence, and also looking at all the facts with a scientific temper. I would like to welcome all of you in the state of Madhya Pradesh. You know, Madhya Pradesh has the history of one of the oldest Indian civilization, as it has been reflected by the discovery in 1982 of fossilized skull in central Narmada Valley village of Hatnora, dating back to 3 lakh to 1.5 lakh years ago. In the period of Middle Pleistocene age. Also at the same time, we have the UNESCO World Heritage Site of Bhimbetka. I'm sure it's not very far away from Bhopal, and I would request the organizers to arrange the visit of the delegates to see our Bhimbetka, which is one of the oldest rock shelters and cave paintings. At the same time, going back into the history of Madhya Pradesh, I would request the Chief Secretary to set up a small team, and I'm told that the Indian History Congress has formed a panel, different panel, to collect all evidence and facts and bring about a history of Madhya Pradesh in the right perspective from the earliest age to the present day. At the same time, I would like to bring to your notice that, of course, as we see the growth of Buddhism in India,
we have the heritage site of Sanchi Stupa and number of different stupas all over the state of Madhya Pradesh. Not enough work has been done on the different stupas that have been discovered in the Vindhya Pradesh region also. At the same time, we then go back to the period of Adi Shankaracharya. Adi Shankaracharya's birth year is also in dispute. Some say that he was born about 500 years before the Christ. And some say it's about 788 years after the Christ. Now these are the issues which have to be looked into by the historians. As it has been believed, the Adi Shankaracharya walked all the way from Kerala to the banks of Narmada to seek Diksha of Swami Govindapad on the banks of river Narmada. Also, there is a dispute now. Now, where did Adi Shankaracharya took his Diksha? Was it at Omkareshwar or another place in Narsinghpur called the Guru Gufa? These are the things which I think the historians must look at and sort of bring it into the right perspective. We have Ujjain, one of the cultural centers of Madhya Pradesh, which dates back its history to almost 2,000 years before the birth of Christ. Then we have Raja Bhoj, the Chandela Dynasty, the Parmar dynasty. The Bhoj temple is also close by. When you go to Bhimbetka, you can also look at the Bhoj temple, which also is one of our a very famous place which you would like to look at. Mandi Deep, it is believed there was a huge lake there. That Bhopal and Bhojtal was somewhere in Mandi Deep, because Mandi Deep derives its name from Dweep, that island. There are remnants where it looked like it was a big lake. But now it's all cultivated land. So another thing which you could look at is the Bhoj temple. Then there are the rule of the Chandelas in the Bundelkhand region, the famous temples of Khajuraho. Now these are all the issues which have to be chronicled in a right perspective if you write the history of Madhya Pradesh. Then of course our own tribal leaders like Rani Durgavati, Raja Raghunath Shah, Shankar Shah, who fought the British. Then, of course, Dhalkari Bai, who belonged to the Kodi community. Then Tatya Bhil, who the Britishers recorded as a dacoit, but he was a local Robin Hood. Then little known Sadat Khan, who fired at the British Residency in 1857, Tatya Tope. Then the history of the ruling princes in the medieval times. All these have to be recorded in the right perspective. To conclude, I would like to reassure all those present here that no matter what people may like to, the forces which are predominant in the country today, who want to rewrite history in a different perspective, the majority of the people in this country stand by the traditions of India the ethos of India, that the history has to be recorded in the right perspective. It has to be based on facts. It has to be examined impartially at all levels. And we will not allow those people who want to write history on parochial lines, who want to write history on myth and mythology. This would never be allowed in this country as far as democracy and the liberal mind and the modern mind exists. With that, I would like to conclude, and on behalf of the state of Madhya Pradesh, I welcome all the historians who have gathered here. Have a pleasant stay. We would go out of our way to make your stay pleasant, and also please look at Madhya Pradesh in a different light. It is one of the oldest civilization and which is now slowly moving with the modern times, and I'm sure this History Congress would give us the new, I would say, face of Madhya Pradesh, which is the center of the oldest civilization in the country. People say that river Narmada is older than river Ganga. So therefore, the importance of Madhya Pradesh stands out by itself. With that, I would like to conclude. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. It is indeed a privilege for the IHC to have had your support and guidance in 2001 as well as this year. I now invite Professor Irfan Habib to read the presidential address of the late President-elect, Professor Sushil Chaudhary. At the end of his address, Professor Chaudhary had appended a short personal note. When Professor Irfan Habib finishes the academic part, Dr. Rakesh Bhattabyal, on the request of his family, will be reading out that note.
Professor Shri Mali, Digvijay Singh Sahab, Professor Mahalakshmi, members of the Executive Committee, fellow delegates and friends. Before I read the address of Professor Sushil Chaudhary, I should like to thank Digvijay Singh Sahab for helping the Indian History Congress in its very serious crisis. He did so 18 years ago. At that time, also, we had a splendid session at Bhopal under his aegis. And today, after our trouble at Pune, with which you are all familiar, it is because of his intervention and the kindness of the Madhya Pradesh government and the Barkatullah University that we are holding this session in such a wonderful manner. At such a situation, it is a particular matter of regret that Professor Sushil Chaudhary, who was to preside over this 79th session, is no more with us. It's a huge tragedy for the Indian History Congress and for all friends and admirers of Professor Sushil Chaudhary, among whom I count myself along with others. Since he is no more with us, and I am very happy that his wife, Professor Ashwati Chaudhary is with us here and has been very kindly found time for us. So what I will do today is that I will read certain extracts from his address. Of course, it would have been better if he had selected the extracts because there's no time to read the whole address. The address has been brought here in printed copies. I hope it would be circulated. Its title is Overland Trade, India's Overland Trade vis-a-vis Overseas Commerce, which enjoyed the primacy in early modern era. This is a paper on how far overland trade during the Mughal period and indeed in the first part of the 18th century continued to be important despite the growth of overseas trade. In other words, the address contains the argument that the trade with Europe and its consequences for India have been overestimated. India's major trade remained with other Asian countries. This is a very important argument which is often missed in Indian economic history texts about the Mughal Empire. And therefore it was very imaginative of Professor Sushil Chaudhary to raise this issue before the Indian History Congress. I will now start reading extracts from the address. The title of the address sounds rather bizarre, even to me, that is, even to Professor Sushil Chaudhary, perhaps because of the fact that we have been accustomed for long to the received wisdom that India's overland trade was a dying phenomenon. With the advent of the Europeans after the discovery of the direct maritime route to India and Asia along the Cape of Good Hope by Vasco da Gama in 1498. This brought about an integration of trade on a global scale in the early modern era, that is between 1500 and 1800. This is the period when India was supposedly gradually incorporated into the capitalist world system through oceanic trade with Europe. The main advocate of the thesis that Indian traditional overland trade was doomed with the advent of the European commerce in the early 17th century is Niels Stensgaard, who emphatically argued the case in his highly acclaimed book, The Asian Trade Revolution of the 17th Century. To coincide with Stensgaard's thesis, it is generally assumed that with the breakdown of the three great empires, the Mughal, the Persian and the Ottoman, and the consequent decline of important ports like Surat, the overland trade was ruined. See, for example, Ashindas Gupta, P.J. Marshall, and others. The reason for this sort of assumption is the paucity of material, especially quantitative data, on Asia's overland trade with India compared with the abundance of material on the European trade in the company's archives. But despite this limitation, Indian overland trade we have been lucky to have found both qualitative and quantitative data, though admittedly not exhaustive, but adequate enough to indicate the trend, with which it can be shown that the share of the Indian merchants in the export of textiles and raw silk, at least, was in fact much higher than that of the European companies, all joined together, that is, Dutch, English, and French, even in the mid-18th century. So far, so good, but then what next? From after the mid-17th century, the joint stock companies, especially the Dutch and the English, began to export commodities from Bengal in large quantities to the West. The Indian craze in Europe is well reflected in the contemporary European or English literature of the time, which clearly shows that it was often fashion rather than the cheapness of Indian and Bengal textiles which worked as an active factor behind the great and sudden demand for Indian Bengal textiles from Europe. This is very well revealed in several pamphlets of the time, such as J. Carey's Tract of 1695 and others. I am not quoting it because actually Professor Sushil Chaudhry's argument is that the European trade with India was much smaller than India's trade with Asian countries during the days of the Mughal Empire. He takes up first textiles. As far as the volume and value of the exports of two major export commodities of Bengal, textiles and raw silk, by the European companies are concerned, they look very impressive, no doubt, but the question that is to be raised in this context is, who were the major exporters of Bengal commodities, the European companies or the Asian and Indian merchants? And hence, as a corollary, who were the major importers of bullion, which was coming to Europe from the Americas? It is also surprising that there is almost a consensus among historians for long that the European companies, especially the Dutch and English companies, were the major exporters of the most important commodities, namely textiles and raw silk from Bengal in the first half of the 18th century, whereas it is argued by Professor Sushil Chaudhry that it was the Indian and other Asian merchants who really were the chief exporters. It is rather unfortunate that a scholar has gone to the extent to suggest that the English and Dutch companies' exports of Bengal textiles and raw silk in the first half of the 18th century generated a significant increase of income, output and employment, and that it created an equivalent of 100,000 new jobs in the textile industry in Bengal. But there is a serious error in Professor Om Prakash's calculations, by which the said scholar arrived at the said figure, which I pointed out in an article in Modern Asian Studies. The controversy between Professor Sushil Chaudhry and Professor Om Prakash has been going on for a long time. It's a very scholarly controversy from which, at least both in method and quantity and analysis, we can learn a lot. I will not go into the details in order to save time. Professor Sushil Chaudhry takes up the whole issue, and his argument is that as Om Prakash tried to find out the full-time job equivalent, he calculated many labor hours weavers and artisans were required to produce the total amount of textiles and yardage exported. This quantitative conclusion from Professor Om Prakash, Professor Sushil Chaudhry contests. He argues that there was an error in Professor Om Prakash's calculations about the length of the yard, and since the yard was much smaller, therefore his argument that a very large amount of labor force was employed to export textiles and silk in Bengal under the aegis of the Dutch and the English companies is mistaken. The quantitative evidence that we have at the moment, though not exhaustive, would indicate that the Indian merchants had a slight edge over the Europeans, even in the textile export from Bengal, even after the Mughal Empire in the first half of the 18th century. In John Taylor's account of Dhaka cloth production in 1747, the Asian share, including that of the Armenians, stood at 2/3 of the total, compared to 1/3 of the European, including the European private trade. That the Asians had a definite lead in the export of textiles over the Europeans is also attested by Dutch company records. In a communication, the Bengal factors of the Dutch company wrote that the advance given for procuring textiles, generally at the rate of 50% at this time, to the tune of 7.6 million by the Asian and Europeans, excluding the Dutch, of which the English and French shares would not have been more than rupees 3 million a year. If that is so, then the Asian share of the advance given to weavers and other textile workers would have been around rupees 4.5 to 5 million. This appears quite plausible in view of the fact that from the several important centers, the exports of the Asian merchants from only two centers, Malta and Dhaka, for which were quite substantial. He then goes on to give data which he collects from various sources on pages 9 and 10. I leave that because that's very difficult to set out while reading. I will now give the conclusions. Thus, the average annual European export of silk textiles would have been around 67,000 to 70,000 pieces, the total of Dutch and English being 54,889 as in table 1.1, and the French between 33,000 and 35,000. While the Asian export was more than 91,000 pieces. It must be noted here that silk textiles was perhaps not a staple variety in the Asian export from Bengal, and yet it was much larger than the European trade. He then goes on to discuss on page 10 and 11 the export of raw silk as against textiles, and on page 12 you will find in table 1.2 that he gives the exports of English and Dutch for the raw silk. Oh, thank you. And he compares this on table 13 with table 1.3, in which he gives the exports of Asian merchants from Murshidabad. I'll read now his conclusion. To sum up, it can be said without any hesitation that the Asian merchants, rather than the Europeans, who were the major exporters of both the most important export commodities from Bengal, namely textiles and raw silk. The two other exported commodities, saltpeter and opium, were not very important at that time. This negates the received wisdom that the Europeans rather than the Asians were the main exporters of Bengal commodities, and as such, the Europeans and not the Asians were the major importers of bullion, of silver bullion. It has been clearly shown in this address that while the export of textiles from Bengal by European companies even in the mid-18th century, that is just before Plassey, was around rupees 5 to 6 million, the Asian export during the same period was at least between rupees 10 and 11 million a year, which unmistakably shows that the predominance of the Asian merchants rather than the Europeans in the export trade of Bengal. In the early 18th century. According to this, the raw silk exported by the Asians during this period, which was worth around 4 to 5.5 million rupees a year, the value of total Asian export of textiles and raw silk in the early 18th century amounted to between rupees 14 and 16 million. Compared to that, the total European export textiles rupees 5 million to 6 million and raw silk rupees 1 million at the most, thus making a total of rupees 6 to 7 million lakhs. This clearly substantiates the predominance of the Asian and Indians rather than the Europeans in Bengal's export trade. It was, unfortunately, this predominant position of the Indian and Asian merchants was subverted systematically by the English company and its servants in the post-Plassey period, as a result of which there was a precipitate decline in the trade of Asian merchants in the second half of the 18th century. The argument is that it was owing to the British conquest of Bengal or dominance over Bengal after Plassey in 1757 that through official action the Asian trade was suppressed. That the traditional overland trade from Bengal by the Indian and Asian merchants was extremely significant even in the mid-18th century, stated in unequivocal terms by responsible company officials. Then Professor Sushil Chaudhary takes up the other end of the trade, that is to say, the countries of Asia which imported Indian textiles and silk, Iran and Central Asia, and how the Indian merchants were settled there and how trade was organized. So that one part dealt with in the address is Bengal and the other part is Central Asia and Iran. For shortage of time, I am afraid I'll have to leave out the very important description which Professor Sushil Chaudhary provides of Indian and Asian merchants trading with India and operating in Iran and Central Asia. He argues that the Mughal control of Kabul and Kandahar was particularly important for this trade. In effect, Professor Sushil Chaudhary has been arguing for a long time, and that argument continues here, that the political entity of the Mughal Empire was particularly important for India's overseas trade and India's trade with Central Asia and Iran and West Asia, which overshadowed the trade with Europe. Then I read the last paragraph with which my part of the reading of the address ends. It may be noted here that compared to the amount of research done on seaborne trade, work on overland trade is barely a fraction. In effect, this is a suggestion by Professor Sushil Chaudhary that we must look more at Asian sources about Asian trade rather than confine ourselves only to the trade of European merchants and companies. If we search not only the archives in the Middle East, Central Asia, Turkey, etc., but also the papers of the tax collection offices of these places, we may get much evidence of the overland trade that passed through these countries. To conduct business in the Ottoman Empire, merchants had to pay tolls, custom duties, etc. If we can retrieve these documents, then a new horizon can be found in the writings of Giles Weinstein. The contribution of the Armenians from 1600 to 1800 can be found in the volume edited by Karam Kevananian and myself, Professor Sushil Chaudhary, in Paris, published from Paris in 2009. Yet much remains to be done. I sincerely hope that a new generation of historians will step forward and embrace this task. At the end of it, as you will notice, through a printer's error, a letter that he had written to the publication in charge of the Indian History Congress, Professor Shireen Musvi, has been put into the address. And this appeal is very important. Digvijay Singh Sahab refers to it, and all members and delegates of the Indian History Congress would know about it, that history is under attack. Because this passage, particularly in this passage, he quotes Rabindranath Tagore twice, in Bengali with an English translation. Therefore, this is beyond me, and the organizers have rightly assigned Dr. Rakesh Baptyal with the task of reading out this last section, which is Professor Sushil Chaudhary's last word to the Indian History Congress, and I'm sure will be taken much to heart. Thank you.
With due deference to all, I read the passage. Thank you, Professor Fanhui. The title is An Earnest Appeal from an Octogenarian Delegate Who Began His Pilgrimage to the Indian History Congress from 1964. I read, I was perturbed by some recent developments which I thought might endanger not only our society, but even our very cultural roots. I hope and pray I am wrong. In this context, we have to remember that it is from time immemorial that India developed a composite culture, and that is why now our country is a nation of 1.3 billion people who use 122 languages and 1600 dialects and practice 7 major religions. This only reiterates the fact India is a country where the main principle is unity in diversity. In this milieu, I remember what Rabindranath Tagore wrote in his famous poem called Bharat Tirtho, Indian Pilgrimage, 1906, in Gitanjali. More than 150 years ago, to quote him, Keha nahi jane, kar ahobane koto manusher dhara, durbar shote elo kotha hote সমুদ্রে holo hara. হেতাই আর্য, হেতাই অনার্য, হেতাই দ্রবিড় চীন, শকহুন দল পাঠান মুঘল এক দেহে হলো লীন. Nobody knows whose invitation invokes so many souls who have gathered here like 100 turbulent current and dissolved in the divine ocean. In this sacred place, Aryans, non-Aryans, Dravidians, Chinese, Shakas, Hunas, Afghans and Mughals have come and detach their individuality in one supreme body. The above reaffirms the fact that India's soul resides in pluralism and tolerance. It is indeed a fact that India's identity has emerged through a long-drawn process of confluence, assimilation, and coexistence. But I am afraid that there is an attempt in recent times to divide India through religion, dogma, and intolerance. It is our composite culture which makes us into one nation, the Indian nation. Thus, it seems that to recapitulate and reinforce the idea of composite culture is the need of the hour. Hence, even Tagore gave a clarion call to all people of the world long back in his poem Bharat Tirtho, again Gitanjali. Esho he ajjo, esho anajjo, Hindu Musalman, esho esho aj tumi Ingraj, esho esho Christian. এসো ব্রাহ্মণ সূচিকরমন ধরো হাত সবাকার এসো হে পতিত হোক অপনীত সব অপমানভার কাম ho Aryans, come non-Aryans, come Hindus and Muslims, come Brahmins, purify your heart, hold the hands of downtrodden and outcast, remove all ills and disrespect, come quickly for the coronation of the mother, where the Mangal Ghat has to be filled, Mangal Ghat Kalash has to be filled with sacred water, which became consecrated by the touch of the great souls who have come together on the seashore to pay reverence. Hope Rabindranath's words will be remembered by all of us, that we are all Indians irrespective of caste and creed, and that it is our obligation to hold to the idea of a composite culture that was a characteristic of India from time immemorial. Thank you, Sushil Chaudhary.
Thank you, Professor Irfan Habib and Dr. Rakesh Bhattacharya. We now have the prize distribution. These are for the papers that were presented in the last session. And I would request that those who have received the awards, who know that they are receiving the awards, that they come to the front. The first award that we have is a very prestigious one. It is the Professor M. Atar Ali Memorial Prize, and I will request the Honorable former Chief Minister, Shri Digvijay Singh Ji. Yes. I will request the Honorable former Chief Minister, Shri Digvijay Singh Ji, to award this particular prize, a very prestigious one, Professor M. Atar Ali Memorial Prize, to Professor Lakshman D. Satya from Pennsylvania, USA. The title of his paper is The Political Economy of Famines in the 19th Century, a case study of Berar Deccan in a comprehensive perspective. I invite Professor Lakshman Satya to collect the award. Thank you. The next awardee is Mr. Dev Kumar Jhanj. He receives the Professor Vijay Kumar Thakur Memorial Prize, the check of 10,000 rupees and certificate, which will be awarded by Shri Digvijay Singh Ji. Since he is on a very prestigious scholarship, the Dad Scholarship, and is at the University of Hull, he has requested his teacher, Professor Suchandra Ghosh, to collect the award on his behalf. Professor Ghosh. Please. Thank you. The Professor J.S. Grewal Prize with a check of 10,000 rupees is awarded to Damut Skem Umdor from Nehu, Shillong. The title of his paper is Technological Progress in the Pre-Colonial Khasi Society. I forgot to mention the name of the paper, the title of the paper of Dev Kumar Jhanj. It is Akshashalika, Akshashalin, Suvarnakara as the engravers of copper plate charters of Odisha. The next prize is the Professor Parthasarthi Gupta Memorial Prize and Professor J.C. Jha Memorial Prize, carrying a check of 10,000 rupees awarded to two persons. One is Somdatta Chakrabarti. Is Somdatta here? Yes. The title of her paper is Striking Work, Defiance and Resistance by the Land Transport Workers and Water Carriers of Colonial Calcutta and Bengal. Please. Isha Dubey is awarded the same prize for her paper Navigating the Outsider, Established Divide, Muhajirs in East Pakistan through the columns of the daily Pasban. Professor Sudhir Ranjan Das Memorial Prize is awarded to Zainab Hussain from AMU Aligarh. The title of her paper is Symbol of Authority, Architectural Study of Minar-e-Jam and Qutub Minar. The Professor Papia Ghosh Memorial Prize is awarded to Madhulagna Haldar from JNU Delhi. The title of her paper is Cultures of Violence, Calcutta in the Times of Naxalbari, 1970 to 75. Dr. Gyaneshwari Devi Memorial Prize is awarded to R. Lakshmi, again from JNU Delhi. The title of her paper is Pidari Temples and the Legacy of Women in the Early Medieval Period, a study of the Chola queen Sembian Madeviyar. The Dr. I.G. Khan Memorial Prize is awarded to Shubhabrata Sarkar from Bardhaman, West Bengal. Is Shubhabrata here? Since he is not here, we will move on to the next prize, which is the Dr. Nasreen Ahmed Memorial Prize, which is awarded to Lakshmi Chandran CP from JNU New Delhi again. The title of her paper is The Matrilineal Households Within the Brahmanical Social Order in Pre-Colonial Kerala, a study of Manipravalam literary sources from 13th to 15th centuries. And the last one, Professor B.B. Chaudhary Prize is awarded to Sunny Ruchi Ekka. The title of her paper is The Making of a Coolie and a Coolie Catchment District, a history of Ranchi district and its inhabitants from 1830 to 1920. Is Sunny Ruchi Ekka here? No. She's not here as well, sir, so we'll take it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the dignitaries for giving the prizes away, and many congratulations to the award winners. We now move to the last part of the program, which is a formal vote of thanks. I invite Professor Bodh Prakash, Joint Secretary of the Indian History Congress, to give a vote of thanks.
Professor Shribali, President of the Indian History Congress, distinguished guests and fellow delegates, it is my pleasure to move this vote of thanks. On behalf of the Indian History Congress, I would like to thank the Honorable Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh, Shri Kamal Nath, for all the support that he and the government of Madhya Pradesh have extended towards the organizing of the 79th session of the Indian History Congress in Bhopal. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the Honorable former Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh, Shri Digvijay Singh, and the Minister for Higher Education, Shri Jitu Patwari, for the generous support that they have extended to us, and also for taking the time out of their busy schedules to participate in the inaugural session this morning. The Vice Chancellor of Barkatullah University, Professor R.J. Rao, deserves our special thanks for hosting this event at such short notice. We are indeed grateful to him for allowing us to set up our local secretariat at the university since the first week of February. Professor Bhupinder Singh, our local secretary, has been particularly helpful in making all the local arrangements. The director and the entire administration of RCVP Narona have been kind enough to offer us their premises as the venue to host this 79th session. We are grateful to them. The Chief Secretary, Principal Secretary Education, Commissioner of Education, and the entire Department of Education deserve our special thanks for their gracious support in the organizing of this event. A very big thank you to all of them.
On behalf of the IHC, I would like to reiterate my thanks to Shri Kamal Nath ji, to Shri Digvijay Singh ji, to Shri Jitu Patwari ji and Shri S.R. Mohanty for their wholehearted help in the organizing of this session of the Congress. Shri Neeraj Mandloi has been particularly a pillar of strength, and his entire team, consisting of Shri Raghavendra Singh ji, Shri Ved Prakash ji, Shri Pathak and others, have been working night and day with us over the past few weeks. The authorities at Barkatullah University, at RCVP Norona Academy also deserve our special thanks for their facilitation of this event. The 79th session is the outcome of the efforts of particularly Shri Gurdeep Sappal, the editor-in-chief of Swaraj Express and newsplatform.in, who are our media partners for this event. Our message of scientific and objective history has found a wider platform through the live telecast and streaming of the academic sessions that we are going to have here over the next few days. The managing editor, Ms. Amrita Rai, has been particularly supportive because of her deep knowledge of the history and cultural traditions of the region, and the entire team of this news channel deserve our special thanks. This is perhaps the first time that the General Secretary's office has also provided a local secretariat on this scale. Our coordination committee, consisting of Shri Gurdeep Sappal, Dr. Rakesh Bhattabyal, Dr. Richa Malhotra, Ms. Amrita Rai, and Shri Pankaj Shukla, were the backbone behind the organizing of this event. Shri Jitendra Kumar and Ms. Menka Rai have handled the local logistics over the past 3 weeks in Bhopal. Other members of the team include Ms. Deepna Kutyal, Ms. Sneha Ganguly, Mr. Abhimanyu Kumar, Mr. Virendra Singh Bittu, Ms. Nirupama, Ms. Prerna Roy, Ms. Ashima, Mr. Pankaj Bahot, and Mr. Deepak Kumar. We have a total of about 60 volunteers who came in from JNU and the University of Delhi, who have been working night and day to make this session into a reality. A heartfelt thank you to all of them. The teachers from various institutions in Bhopal and other parts of Madhya Pradesh who have been here as volunteers over the past few days, a very big thank you to you. The designers, the caterers, that is MP Tourism, and the event management firm of Mr. Pritesh Gupta that have been working non-stop since last week also deserve our thanks for all their help and support. Finally, my sincere thanks to the members of the EC of the IHC, and particularly to all our delegates for coming here at such short notice. Thank you very much. With this, we come to the close of the session, but I do have a few announcements to make, if you will permit me, sir. This is about the venue for the various sessions that will follow immediately after the tea break. So we reconvene at 11:45 in the respective rooms that have been assigned for the sessions. Ancient India session will be in the room called Adhunik Room, number 108. The archaeology session will be in room S65. The medieval India session will be in room G24. The modern India room will be this very hall, Swarn Jayanti Hall. The contemporary India session will be in F45, and the countries other than India session will be in S64. When we reconvene at 11:45, the sectional presidents will address their respective sections. Thank you very much. Please join us for a cup of tea outside.